My parents paid my sister but refused to pay me. Confused, I asked why. My mother scoffed. Your family, so you work for free. My sister smirked as a huge payment notification lit up her screen. Maybe you're just not worth it, she mocked. Without a word I left, but days later something unbelievable happened. I never thought my own family would betray me like this. I always believed that no matter what they would be fair, that they would at least respect me, but I was wrong. So wronged. He all started when my parents decided to expand their business. They own a small family-run company for as long as I can remember. Talked about turning it into something bigger. My sister and I grew up hearing about their dreams, how one day you could take over and make it even more successful. When I graduated, they offered me a position in the company. It wasn't a high-paying role, but I didn't care. I was excited to contribute, prove myself. My sister, who was a few years older, had already been working there for some time. And from what I could tell, she was doing well. She had a nice car, moved into a fancy apartment, and never seemed to struggle financially. I assumed she was getting paid well, but I never thought to ask. After all, why would I was focused on working hard and earning my place in the company? That was my mistake. Assuming everyone was being treated fairly for months, I dedicated myself to the business. Late nights, early mornings, Kin spent handling extra tasks. I went above and beyond because I thought I was building something that would eventually be mine too. Then one day, I overheard something that made my stomach drop. My sister was talking on the phone, laughing, saying something about a huge payment she had just received. I remember the exact words. Mom and Dad just sent it over. Crazy, right? So much for struggling at work. I froze. Payment. What payment? I brushed it off at first, thinking maybe it was a bonus or something, but something about the way she said it didn't sit right with me. So later that night, I decided to ask my parents about it. I wasn't expecting a confrontation. I wasn't even mad at that point. I just wanted to understand. But when I asked them, my mother scoffed, shaking her head, like I had said something ridiculous. Your family, she said, as if that explained everything. Family doesn't work for money. We all help each other out. That's just how it is. I stared at her, completely speechless. If working for free was normal, why was my sister getting paid? That's when I heard a ding, the sound of a notification. My sister smirked, glancing at her phone. My heart pounded as she turned the screen toward me. Just enough for me to see the message. A large payment had just been deposited into her account. I swallowed hard. Maybe you're just not worth paying, she said mockingly, her smirk widening. Something inside me snapped that I didn't argue. I didn't yell. I didn't demand an explanation. I just closed my phone, turned around and walked away. But what happened next? Poor things get really interesting. I walked straight to my room, my mind racing. How could they do this to me? After everything I had done for the company, late nights, early mornings, extra hours. I was nothing more than free labor to them. And my sister, she knew about it. She enjoyed it. That smirk on her face wasn't just arrogance. It was satisfaction. I sat on my bed staring at my phone. I wanted to scream, confront them, to demand answers. But what was the... They had already made up their minds. I spent the next few days in a fog. I still showed up to work, but my heart wasn't in it. Every time I saw my parents, all I could hear was my mother's dismissive laugh. Every time I saw my sister, I imagined that payment notification flashing on her screen. Then one night I made a decision. I was done. I wasn't going to waste another second working for people who didn't respect me. If I wasn't worth paying, then I wasn't worth staying. The next morning I walked into the office, went straight to my dad's desk and handed him my resignation. He barely looked up from his computer. Don't be dramatic, he muttered. I stood my ground. I'm leaving, he sighed, finally turning to face me. Where are you even going to go? You don't have another job lined up? You don't have a plan? And he was right, I didn't. But I would doubt. I gave them one last glance, then walked out the door. I didn't even take my personal things. I just left. And for the first time in a long time, I felt free. But what I didn't realize was that my departure would set off a chain of events that none of us saw coming. For the first few days, I felt lost. I had no job, no income, and no real plan. But strangely, I didn't regret leaving. If anything, felt relieved, like I had finally taken control of my own life instead of being a pawn in someone else's game. I spent the next week applying for jobs, updating my resume, figuring out my next steps. I didn't talk to my family at all, not a single call, not a single text. And they didn't reach out either. At first that hurt. Then I realized if they didn't care enough to check on me, why should I care about them? Then something unexpected happened. Late one night, I got a message from an old colleague, someone who had briefly worked at my parents' company before quitting out of frustration. Hey, I heard you left. Good for you. By the way, you might want to check the company's finances. Something weird is going on. I frowned. Weird how? Just look into it. Trust me, I had no idea what they were talking about. My curiosity got the best of me. I still had access to some of the company's financial records. My parents had never bothered revoking my login. So out of sheer curiosity, I decided to take a look. What I found made my blood run cold. There were massive payments going out, way more than what my sister should have been getting, not just her salary, bonus after bonus, all marked under vague descriptions like consulting fees and special allowances. That wasn't even the worst part. Some of the transactions were under my name, payments that I never received, money that should have been mine but had clearly been funneled elsewhere. If I was right about where it was going, then my parents weren't just being unfair, they were stealing from me. I sat there staring at the screen, my heart pounding. This wasn't just favoritism. This wasn't just my parents refusing to pay me. This was straight up fraud. They had been using my name to move money that was never actually deposited into my account. And judging by the dates, this had been happening for months, maybe even years. I took a deep breath and scrolled further. The transactions all led back to one account, an account that unsurprisingly belonged to my sister. All those fancy things she had, car, the apartment, the expensive vacations, they weren't just from her salary. They were partially paid for with money that was supposed to be mine. I felt sick. I wanted to storm into that office and confront them. I wanted to scream to demand answers, but I knew better. If they were willing to steal from me, there was no telling how far they go to cover it up. So instead took screenshots every transaction, every fraudulent payment. I backed up everything onto a private drive and even sent copies to a trusted friend, just in case something happened to my files. Then I sat back and thought I had two options. One could confront them directly, but they would just deny it, twist the story, and make it seem like I was overreacting. Daughter two, could hit them where it really hurt their reputation, their business, their money, and the more I thought about it, the more I realized this wasn't just about getting back what was mine, it was about making them pay. So I made a plan. When the time came, they never saw it coming. I spent the next few days preparing carefully. First, I contacted an accountant, I knew, former employee of my parents' company who had left on bad terms. I showed them everything I had found. Their reaction, pure shock. This is serious. They said, if they're moving money under your name without your consent, fraud. And if they're using company funds for personal expenses, that could be embezzlement. That was exactly what I needed to hear. Next, I reached out to a lawyer. I explained everything, showed them the records and asked what my options were. Their response was even better. You have a solid case. If you take legal action, you could recover the stolen money and possibly even take down the company. That's when I knew I wasn't just going to expose them, I was going to destroy them. Before I made my move, I wanted to do one last thing. I wanted to see if they would admit to it, so I arranged a casual visit home. My first time seeing them since I had quit. When I walked through the door, my mom barely looked up from her phone. My dad just nodded. My sister, she had that same smug expression she always wore. Like she had won. I sat down at the dining table, cleared my throat, and said as casually as I could, "So I've been going through my finances, found something interesting?" My mom raised an eyebrow. I said, leaning forward, "Apparently I've been getting paid this whole time, except I never saw a cent of it." Weird. Silence. Dumb. Why? Dad's expression didn't change. But I saw his jaw tighten. My mom shifted slightly in her chair. My sister, she was suddenly very interested in her phone. That was all the confirmation I needed. I let the silence drag out before finally standing up. "Anyway, just thought I'd mention it. I'm sure the authorities will find it just as interesting as I did." My mom's head snapped up. What? I smiled. "Didn't I mention? I spoke to a lawyer and an accountant. Let's just say things are about to get very interesting." Then I turned and walked out. That was when everything truly started to fall apart. I didn't look back as I walked out of that house, but I knew I just set a fire that couldn't be put out. First sign of panic came that very night. My phone buzzed repeatedly, calls from my mom, my dad, even my sister. I didn't answer a single one. Then came to text. "Mom, we need to talk. Don't do anything stupid. Dad, let's be reasonable about this. Family issues shouldn't be handled this way. Sister, you're being dramatic. It's not a big deal, not a big deal. They had been stealing from me, using me like free labor and funneling my money into my sister's account. Now that I was standing up for myself, they wanted to play the family card. Too late for that." The next morning I met with my lawyer again. I officially filed a lawsuit against my parents' company for fraud and financial misconduct. My lawyer assured me that with the evidence I had, they wouldn't just have to pay me back. You could face serious legal trouble. I wasn't the only one who had issues with them. I started reaching out to old employees, people who had left the company because of shady practices. Didn't take long to find others who had been underpaid, overworked, or even scammed by my parents. Word started spreading. Then came the real explosion that a week later, an anonymous whistleblower, not me, I swear, leaked the financial documents I had found. The information somehow made its way to a business watchdog website. And just like that, my parents' company was under public scrutiny. Clients started pulling out, investors started backing away. The reputation my parents had spent years building, It was crumbling overnight. And my sister's precious bank account, the one filled with money stolen from me, it was frozen. Then just when I thought things couldn't get any worse for them, the authorities got involved. The investigation moved too fast for my parents to cover their tracks. One morning, I woke up to the news. My parents' company was officially being audited for financial fraud, and it got worse for them. Turns out the money funneled through my name wasn't the only shady thing they had done. As investigators dug deeper, more skeletons came tumbling out of their closet: unreported income, tax evasion, misused company funds. It was a mess. And then one morning my sister called me. For the first time in weeks I actually picked up. "Are you happy now?" she snapped. "You ruined everything." I almost laughed. "I ruined everything. You and Mom and Dad stole from me, lied to me, used me, and you think I'm the problem." "It wasn't stealing," she shot back, her voice cracking. "It was just reallocating. They said you'd get it back eventually." I shook my head. "You actually believe that?" Silenced. I let it hang for a moment before continuing, my voice calm. "You had every opportunity to be better than them, but you chose to be just like them. Now you're facing the consequences." She didn't say another word before hanging up. That was the last time we spoke, but things didn't end there. A few weeks later my lawyer called me with an update. "Your parents' company is collapsing with the lawsuits, the fines and the lost clients. It won't survive much longer. And my money. I asked they'll have to pay it back. Every last cent." I leaned back in my chair, exhaling slowly. I had won. They had spent years treating me like I was worthless. I didn't deserve to be paid. I was just free labor. And now they were the ones who had lost everything. I should have felt satisfied, triumphant even. But all I felt was free. Finally, the real chaos began when my parents realized there was no way out. One evening, I got a call from my mother. I almost ignored it. Something in me wanted to hear what she had to say. The moment I answered, all I heard was sobbing. "How could you do this to us?" she wailed. "We're your family. You're ruining us." I stayed silent, letting her cry, her voice breaking between gasps. Then my father took the phone. Unlike my mother, he wasn't crying. He was furious. "You want grateful brat," he spat. "After everything we've done for you, you stab us in the back like this?" I scoffed. "After everything you did to me. We fed you, we gave you a home, and you repay us by tearing our business apart." That made me laugh bitterly. "Now I owe you my entire life because you did the bare minimum as parents." My father was seething. "Do you even realize what you've done? We might go bankrupt. We could lose our house. Your mother is sick with stress. She's been crying for days. She should have thought about that before stealing for me." I shot back. "This is your fault," my father roared. "You destroyed your own family over a little money." "That was a dot." I snapped. "A little money? You stole years of my pay. You used me to cover your tracks. You let my sister live like a queen while treating me like a servant. And now you want sympathy." My voice was shaking with rage, but I didn't stop. "You chose this. You thought you could get away with it forever. Now that you're finally facing the consequences, you blame me." The line went dead, and I guess he couldn't handle the truth, but it wasn't overdone. A few days later I got a text from my sister. "Sister, I hope you're happy. Mom had a breakdown. She can barely eat. Company's going under. We're losing everything. But I guess that doesn't matter to you." I stared at the message, shaking my head. They still didn't get it. They thought this was my doing, that I was the villain. That I typed back. "You had a choice. You could have treated me like family. Instead, you treated me like garbage. Enjoy the consequences." And I hit send. The final blow came a week later. My lawyer called me. "It's official. Company is bankrupt. Your parents are being forced to sell their assets. You'll be getting your money back." I nodded, taking it all in. I had won. A few days later, I drove past my parents' office. The building was empty, a "he for sale" sign stuck in the dirt. My childhood home, also on the market. Everything they had built, empire they had controlled, was gone. It didn't take long for the rumors to start spreading. Their once reputable company was now a cautionary tale of greed, deceit, and shattered family bonds. Clients who had trusted them for years were filing complaints. Employees who had been with the company for decades were getting settlements. In the press, they were all over it. The scandal made headlines, but it wasn't just the company that had fallen apart. The family was unraveling too. Weeks passed, and I still couldn't bring myself to reach out to them. I knew it was over. There was no fixing what had been broken. Then one afternoon my phone buzzed again. It was my mother. This time I answered. "We've lost everything," she said, her voice devoid of emotion. "The house is gone. The company is gone. Your father, he's drinking more than ever. I don't know what to do anymore." I wasn't sure how to respond. Part of me wanted to say, "Good." But another part of me felt an unfamiliar twinge of guilt. "What do you want me to say?" I finally asked, my voice flat. "We just need you to come back. Help us fix this. Please, we're family." Her voice cracked that I paused. The words were laced with desperation. All I could think about was everything I had lost. The years spent working without pay, the broken promises. The way they had treated me like I was invisible, disposable. You had your chance to treat me like family, but you chose not to, I said coldly. You chose money over me. And now you're asking for my help. There was a long silence on the other end. Could hear her sniffing, trying to hold it together. Please, we're sorry. Your father is falling apart. Can't handle this. I bit my lip, staring at the floor. Maybe you should have thought about that. Before all of this started, you thought I was worthless. Now better. Her response was barely a whisper. You were never worthless. You're my child, but we were wrong. Please, I'm begging you. It was hard to hear her like this. Broken, pleading. A part of me almost wanted to reach out. The other part of me, part that had been hurt, betrayed and ignored, was too angry to forgive. I can't help you, I said finally. Not anymore. And with that, I hung up. Days passed and the noise from my family slowly faded away. Call stopped. Text stopped. My parents had officially hit rock bottom and there was nothing left for them to take from me anymore. I focused on rebuilding my own life. Moving forward, I found peace in knowing that I had taken control. And as much as it hurt to see them crumble, I knew I couldn't go back. The truth was, there was no fixing what had been broken. The damage they had caused was too deep, too ingrained. I had to keep moving forward, even if it meant leaving them behind. And that's where my story ends. Now I'm curious, what would you have done in my place? Would you have given them a second chance? Or would you have walked away like I did? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below.